Hello and welcome to CATSweek. I'm Annalise Poorman. The Bloomington City Council met on January 17th for its second regular session of the year. The council heard the second reading of a resolution to approve recommendations to the mayor for the distribution of community block grant funds for 2024. Deputy Clerk Jennifer Crossley read the synopsis for the resolution.
The synopsis is as follows. The City of Bloomington is eligible for a Community Development Block Grant, CDBG, from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, estimated to be $855,868. This resolution outlines program recommendations by the mayor with input from the Citizens Advisory Committee and the Redevelopment Commission. Pursuant to federal regulations, CDBG allocations are made across the following general program areas: social service programs, physical improvement, and administrative services.
Interim Director of Bloomington's Housing and Neighborhood Development, Anna Killian Hansen, detailed the grant allocation.
Right now, the allocation that we're proposing is administration is receiving $171,174. Social services, $128,380. Physical improvements, $556,314. For a grand total of $855,868. For physical improvements, the organizations are Centerstone of Indiana, Life Designs, Monroe County United Ministries, New Hope for Families, Summit Hill Community Development Corp., also known as BHA.
District 3 Representative Hopi Strasburg asked about the history of CDBG fund allocations.
I noticed in the packet that there were some organizations that did not receive funding that they requested. Historically, do we usually have more applicants than we have money? And is there a trend that the same organizations tend to get awards every year, or do we end up, do people end up taking turns? How does that usually happen?
First of all, this is my first year, so please bear with me. I may not know that answer, but I'd be more than happy to get back to you with that. But from my understanding and looking at previous year's allocations and how the CAC has voted, typically there are more applicants than are awarded, and they are scored. So the CAC has, and I know that we have a council member present that was actually on the CAC who may want to chime in on how that happened, but they are scored and then given their allocations.
Councilmember Dave Rollo noted that CDBG funding has generally declined over the years. He expressed concern that more funding could be allocated to social services, such as the Jack Hopkins program, while devoting less money to the city.
So my observation is that as I've been on the council, what I've noticed is that the CDBG funding has declined year on year. As a matter of fact, I looked at a historical view, and back in the 70s, the allocations, the total amount from the federal government was on the order of $16 billion. Today it's about $3.5 billion, and that's in inflation-adjusted dollars. So the total amount is decreasing, and as was noted, the number of applicants have increased as well. This year, the physical improvements requests were $1.1 million. We only funded half that, $556,000. For social services, it was even worse. It was, the total requests equaled $300,000, and the funding available was about $128,000. Of the 12 social service agencies that requested social service funding, only 5 of those received no funding whatsoever. So looking further at the historical record of this, we received, give or take, we don't know exact numbers right now, but we received about $856,000. In 2014, we received $954,000. In 2004, we received $1.24 million. So the amount is decreasing every year. So we can anticipate that it's either going to flatline probably, or it's going to continue decreasing. So what can we do about that? It seems like the logical step is to address this through the Jack Hopkins Social Service Fund. Unfortunately, that has more or less flatlined as well. In the past few years, I know a number of colleagues on the council have requested that the past administration increase funding for Jack Hopkins. It was funded increase, but meager incremental increases. So last year we had $323,000 for Jack Hopkins, $319,000 in 2020, $270,000 in 2015. So it's not keeping pace, certainly not keeping pace with inflation. Poverty is a real problem in this community. We have this, we must address the needs of low-income people in this community. Since 2005, I also note that because of inflation, we have people have about 1/3 less purchasing power on the dollar because of inflation. So I would just say this to make a case that we ought to be increasing Jack Hopkins significantly in the future, doubling or tripling that amount in order to make up so that we could at least keep parity with where we used to be. And then, perhaps, well, that would do a lot of good. And I respect all of these agencies that applied, some of which received nothing in their requests. So that's my modest request of the council administration, that we really focus hard on Jack Hopkins and increase it in this coming year's budget. Thank you.
Councilmember Matt Flaherty shared Rollo's concern about the decreasing funding, specifically around social services. To proactively address the issue, he proposed a cooperation between the Jack Hopkins and CDBG social services committees in future years.
What I might suggest we consider, though, not this year, but perhaps in a future year, is the synergies between the Jack Hopkins Social Services Committee and the CDBG Social Services Committee. I'm concerned a little bit about the administrative burden on often personnel-strapped nonprofits applying to multiple cycles for the same basic purpose through different city funding mechanisms. I think both the Jack Hopkins Social Services Committee and the CDBG Citizens Advisory Committee for Social Services have done a lot of great work over the years, but perhaps we could actually seek to combine those, and we could augment the CDBG dollars on the social services side, to the tune of another $600,000 or $800,000 to better meet the need, have one process for social service agencies, and if we feel like there needs to be more formalized criteria that leverages the work that's gone into Jack Hopkins over the years, and or even better or more council representation on that Citizen Advisory Committee, I think we could do that and create that process. I think both of those are bodies of our own design.
Councilmember Kate Rosenbarger added that it's difficult for grant applicants to predict what the committees for the Jack Hopkins and CDBG grants will be considering each year. She suggested using software to facilitate this process.
I think all of this is really taxing on those people applying. Most of our nonprofits here maybe have a development director, but full-time, but maybe they do not because they're small, and full-time jobs cost a lot. So I would love for this council potentially to start this year to work with the departments that are helping with these grants. I mean, Jack Hopkins is us, but CDBG is HAND, and look at granting software that is easier for the applicant and easier for the grantor to make it more predictable, to go through that process, to not only help with the granting process, but also to look at impact over time, because these are all stories of a lot of millions of dollars that we are granting, but we're not really showing the impact in our city and with our residents that these dollars fund.
The council approved the CDBG funds unanimously. At the Monroe County Public Library Board of Trustees meeting on January 17th, Director Greer Carson gave his monthly report on the state of the library, specifically noting a water leak at the New Southwest branch.
Okay, I'll begin with the big story we're all focused on, and that's the water leak and subsequent flooding at our New Southwest branch library. I first want to say that despite the obvious misfortune of having an unexpected system failure at one of our libraries and at our brand new Southwest library, no less, I believe we were on the whole very fortunate that the crisis occurred while the building was closed, so no patrons were in the building and no staff were on site at the time. So it's worth reflecting on that as we work through the forthcoming stages of mitigation, restoration, and eventual reopening. So this past Monday, January 15th, we discovered a significant water leak coming from the ceiling tiles above the lounge area just outside the large program room. We immediately shut off the water line to the building. We believe the leak occurred between midnight and 2 a.m. Monday morning. By approximately 7:30 a.m., water had pooled in this area and had moved into the large program room, the adjoining teen space, portions of the children's space, and adult print collection area. Water also traveled through the floor and down through the parking garage ceiling tiles and onto the garage floor. MCPL staff, led by Building Services Director Brian Leibacher, moved quickly to soak up or otherwise remove all standing water. We contacted our environmental mitigation company, our HVAC service provider, our general contractor, and our insurance company, all of whom are now on site and involved in the assessment, mitigation, and restoration planning process. We immediately decided to close the Southwest branch until further notice, made plans for Southwest Library staff to continue off-desk work and other duties that would keep them safely distanced from the impacted areas, and made some decisions on collections, holds, programs, and room reservation cancellations. We are currently in the middle of the full and official damage assessment process, but here's what we know so far. Due to a combination of weather-related factors, about 8 Train brand VAV boxes had frozen at the tube bends, and an outside air damper and damper blades had frozen at the frame in the open position. Our HVAC contractors determined this was the likely cause of the leak and manually closed and secured the damper to prevent any further potential damage. All other parts of the HVAC system and related facility systems were then checked and determined to be in good working order. Our unofficial assessment at this time is that the frozen open damper led to an excess of cold air traveling through the pipes, which then caused some of the pipes to crack and leak water onto the floor below and on down to the garage. We will have an official assessment of the cause in the coming days. In the aforementioned areas, and in addition to the HVAC system component failures, we sustained damage to our ceiling tiles, hard surface flooring, carpeted flooring, drywall and interior insulation, and some furniture and shelving. No collections were impacted by the leak, no public or staff computers or equipment were damaged, and no other physical areas of the library were impacted.
Board member Kari Essery asked how patrons will receive updates on the Southwest branch. Carson responded.
First of all, kudos to all the library staff and the patrons. How will the information be communicated out to the Southwest patrons?
Primarily through our website and our social media posts. We do encourage patrons to call the library, and that would come downtown, and we have a bunch of information we can give over the phone, and we do that on kind of a daily basis. But mostly the way we communicate is through our social media posts and our website.
The next Monroe County Public Library Board of Trustees meeting will be held on February 21st. The Bloomington Board of Public Works met on January 16th. First, Neighborhood Compliance Officer Rob Council asked the board to approve the abatement of a property on North Clark Street. Council shared that the owner of the property is willing to have the city assist in cleaning up the yard.
We have crossed this bridge with this property owner before on his home property. This is a second property that's just up the street. Another big pile of newspaper sticks and other garbage. I've spoken to the homeowner. He understands it's coming, and he just said, come clean it up. So that's where we're at.
Board member Elizabeth Karen followed up with questions on the number of NOVs, or notice of violations, the property owner had been given before they were fined. Council explained the history of warnings and fines for the property.
Why the gap in NOVs between March and September instead of following up? And I'll just ask my second one at the same time. The March NOV has a fine?
Yes.
Instead of a warning for the first ostensibly NOV?
Sure. As far as the gap goes, he had made progress on that property, so I kind of laid off and then started directing my attention towards his home, which is the one that we addressed at the last abatement session. He had made some progress at this Clark Street property, but when we started to abate his home property at 8th Street, he moved a bunch of garbage up there onto Clark, thus starting my enforcement actions on that property again.
Okay, so was the March NOV built upon previous NOVs that would have started with a warning and a $50?
That's correct.
Gotcha.
Director of Public Works Adam Wason asked for clarification on whether or not a repeating violation would receive a warning before being fined. Council said that they would not receive a warning on a repeated violation. Karen asked why there was a red void stamp on one of the notices. Council responded and noted that the property owner is always on time paying the fines.
It could be possibly that he paid it twice. This guy is always on time paying his stuff. Like, he's got no issues as far as that
So he's
goes.
aware of the issues, he's working with you,
100%.
and he's just continually paying the fines?
He's a very unique character.
Okay.
The next Bloomington Board of Public Works meeting will be held on January 30th. At the January 16th meeting of the Richland Bean Blossom School Board, Assistant Superintendent Matt Irwin proposed an increase in the full-day rate for 3-year-olds attending Edgewood Early Childhood Center.
As you know, we run the preschool as a service. It's not something that's a money-making endeavor for the school corporation. We subsidize that. And so one of the things that we're very conscious of is the quality of programming that we're providing and the affordability of what it is that we're providing as well, because we know the value of a quality preschool education. So right now, our 4-year-olds, the price would stay the same. We would still keep it at $16 a day for half-day daily rate and $32 a day for the full-day rate. But there would be a $3 increase for the full-day daily rate for 3-year-olds, because you can't have as many 3-year-olds in the room when you look at some of the NACE and pass the quality requirements when it comes to staffing levels, as well as there's a little bit more care and possibly diapering, some other things like that that go along with working with students of that age.
The board approved the proposal for the 2024-2025 school year. The Bloomington Utilities Service Board met on January 16th. Lake Lemon Conservancy District Manager Adam Casey gave a presentation on their ongoing projects and the work they have been doing to reduce sediment buildup in the lake.
I really just wanted to give an update on some of the things that have been going on recently, and I think you'll be happy to see them and some of the progress that we have been making. First of all, this is a image of Lake Lemon on the eastern edge where Bean Blossom Creek comes in. This is an image in the early spring. We have a lot of sediment that comes into Lake Lemon. That's our number one issue, is the sediment management and then trying to retain water volume. So we started the Lake Lemon Sediment Management Project in the early 2000s, and we're continuing on that. The purpose is really to manage the lake, enhance wetland functionality, enhance and maintain recreation, then increase the longevity of the lake. In this first couple slides, I'll just kind of go through a little bit of history and then where we are at. So, history of sedimentation. This is an image from a 1974 report from Army Corps and some other areas that just show the Lake Lemon split up when they're looking at the longevity of the lake. So back in this 1974 image, they estimated about 40,000 yards of sediment coming into Lake Lemon per year. And the east end, they had a nominal lifespan, or usable lifespan, of about 80 years. And I'm not sure if there is a laser on this, but those dashed marks on the right-hand side are what they call the east end past that. That is all gone now. The nominal lifespan has long passed, probably 15 years ago. Those peninsulas on the north and south just have access channels now that are in those areas, so there really is no water capacity, and that's kind of the line in the sand that we're drawing for maintenance. We recently worked with Christopher Burke and a couple other engineering firms to look at actual sediment loading that's going on in Lake Lemon. With those initial estimates about 40,000, those are way off. What we've actually found between 2014 and 2019 is about 136,000 yards of sediment coming in to the lake per year, which is a massive amount, and it's very hard to manage, but I think we are getting to that point.
Casey said that their overarching goals are to maintain water quality and recreation potential, and shared some ways that they have been working to achieve them.
Prior to my time, and I've been managing since 2015, I was a lake biologist a couple years prior to that. Our overarching goals, which is also our goals of the lease of the city, is maintaining water quality and recreation potential. We started an in-house operation in 2009. Between 2009 and 2020, we actually had an in-house barge operation. During that whole time span, we averaged about 10 to 11,000 cubic yards removed of sediment per year, which essentially just maintained these access channels along the eastern coves and where the homes are. And then we've also been linear or stabilizing the shoreline, over 15,000 linear feet stabilized. So we've done this all in-house with some layer grant money from DNR, Lake and River Enhancement, early on. The rest is through the taxpayers at Lake Lemon. So after we did our sediment transport studies, we realized we're not even keeping up or making an impact with this. We're moving 10,000 yards a year. We're looking at 120 plus coming in per year. So what we actually did was work with Shrewsbury and Christopher Burke and came up with a management plan in 2019. All these different images are little aspects that we thought of. The big zones in the open lake, 1 through 5, were dredging zones just so we could segment and monitor what we were looking at. The other stuff in the east, we're looking at opening up old creek channels, kind of enhancing the flow of water through the wetlands to capture sediment, how we can best slow down the sediment and then capture it in those areas. What we ultimately found out from our sediment transport studies and with Christopher Burke is that we're really not going to capture sediment any faster than that existing delta is doing, so we need to focus on the dredging. Kind of our most cost effective is to remove that sediment once it lands there. So in 2019, we purchased a 13-acre plot of land with the taxpayer dollars on the south shore of Lake Lemon to kind of start our sediment management project with the hydraulic dredging. We sold a $1 million bond, and then as well when the markets were really low, to fund this initial land purchase and then kick off this initial hydraulic dredging project and the creation of our disposal basins.
He said the biggest problem that they have is deciding where to put the sediment after they dredge it out of the lake, in addition to the toxic algae blooms that grow in the lake.
The biggest issue that we have out there is, besides money, is where do we put the sediment? And it's very tough. We're in ravines. There's not much farmland around there. So this is, again, back to our elements map. On the bottom, there's kind of a pond that's highlighted there. That is where we'll be starting our 2024 project. One of the reasons we loved this area is because the hazardous algal blooms, the blue-green algae, which is a very hot topic now, are just off the charts in this pond. There's like minimal connectivity. There's no wave action, no vegetation. So our plan is to fill this in during this 2024 project. And then per our permitting and per our plan, what we'll actually do is do a constructed emergent wetland. So we will plant that, so it'll actually be a treatment wetland. It'll still allow the flood buffering capacity, but it'll be vegetated to take up the nutrients and actually clean the water coming through. So we're both accomplishing the dredging and then enhancing water quality with this.
Board member Amanda Burnham asked if they've received any complaints from residents near one of the sediment dumping grounds. Casey responded.
The first area that you were using for the sediment dumping, it looked to be that there weren't a lot of homeowners around it. It was very much kind of landlocked in there, correct?
Correct,
This second one, this last one that you just showed before you came up, runs along North Shore, and there's a lot of housing there. So it may be it may be premature to start that discussion, but have there been any concerns from homeowners in that area?
So really it's been great feedback about what we have been doing. It's very visual with the dredging that's going on. That actual area on the northern side does not have any direct homeowners along that side. On South Shore, there's not any development or North Shore, sorry, until you go down the roads a little bit. And then on either side, east or west, it's forested right now. And then as you head north on that Possum Trot Road right there, there's a couple of cabins that are way back in there, but it's not in like a very populated district, or there's no density of housing at all there.
The next regularly scheduled Utilities Service Board meeting will be held on January 29th. And that is all for Cats Week. Thank you for joining us. For Cats and WFHB, I'm Annalise Poorman.